Forcing his way onto the roster in 2001 after a dominant spring training, Albert Pujols went on to have possibly the greatest 10-year stretch any player's ever had, that being in his first 10 years. So let's look at how that stretch started and how it happened.
Totally sports-esque. Major League.
3 years after immigrating from the Dominican Republic, Albert Pujols finished his only season at Maple Woods Community College in Missouri, where he played shortstop and hit a casual .461 with 22 home runs. And only a few teams would be interested in drafting him. The concerns were his build, where he would play, and concerns of his actual age. In the 1999 draft, it wasn't until the 13th round that Pujols was drafted. The team with the first pick of the round was the Tampa Bay Devil Rays, and scout Fernando Arango was begging them to draft Pujols. Instead, they drafted Jason Pruitt, who never made it to the majors. The pick crushed Arango so much that he would quit his role as a scout. And 17 picks after, the St. Louis Cardinals took Albert Pujols with the 402nd pick, becoming maybe the greatest late-round pick in history. And he made his mark quick. In the 2000 season, he played a majority of his games in Single A, where he hit .324 with 17 home runs, 84 RBIs, and a .953 OPS in 109 games. He was named the MVP of the Midwest League, and after playing 21 games in High A, he joined the AAA Memphis Redbirds at the end of the season, where he hit .367 in the playoffs as they won the Pacific Coast playoffs. And he won playoff MVP, so his name was out there going into spring training in 2001. But he wasn't on the roster just yet. But after watching the way the ball flew off his bat, and after hitting .351 with 8 extra base hits in the spring, Mark McGwire told Tony La Russa they had to bring this 38-year-old kid up to the majors. And with Bobby Bonilla pulling his hamstring, they had an excuse to do so, and he wouldn't be going anywhere. With Bonilla's injury, Pujols debuted in left field on opening day, and he also played right field, third, and first throughout the season. And Pujols came up with expectations that he would go back to the minors soon, but with each passing week, he left them no choice but to keep him up. He helped the Cardinals win the NL Central, and he hit his first postseason home run off Randy Johnson in Game 2 of the NLDS, but he struggled the rest of the series, hitting just .111. And by the standards of his first 10 seasons, he had a sophomore slump in 2002, which was still MVP level. The only time this decade he did not make the All-Star team, having a much better second half, where he recorded a .335 average with a .936 OPS, as he finished the season with a .314 average with 34 home runs and 127 RBIs, becoming the first player in MLB history to hit over 300, drive 100, and score 100 runs in the first 2 seasons, in what would be his lowest average and OPS of the decade. Saying a lot right there, again not having a chance to win MVP, with Barry Bonds putting up ridiculous numbers, becoming the first Cardinal since Stan Musial to finish top 4 in MVP voting in back-to-back seasons. The Cardinals again winning the NL Central as they again faced the Diamondbacks, this time sweeping them as Pujols hit 300, but they would lose to the Giants in the NLCS. And despite not being eligible for arbitration, the Cardinals signed Pujols to a 1-year $900,000 contract before 2003, which led him in to what might have been his best season. He was back in the All-Star game after receiving the most votes in the National League, the middle of the season highlighted by his 30-game hit streak from July 12th to August 16th, tied with Stan Musial for the second longest in Cardinals history. Pujols hitting his 100th career home run in the midst of this, as he joined Ralph Kiner, Eddie Matthews, and Joe DiMaggio as the only players to hit their 100th home run in their third season, ending the season with 114 home runs, which tied Kiner for the most with 3 seasons. In a season where he hit 40 home runs for the first time with 43, with an 8.7 WAR, as he led the league in doubles, runs, and hits, as he recorded 200 hits for the first time. And with a hit in his last game against the Astros, he finished the season with a .359 average, beating Todd Helton by .0002 for the batting title in the closest finish in NL history. And that still wasn't enough to put him ahead of Bonds in MVP voting, his second straight second-place finish behind Bonds. Before the 2004 season, Pujols signed a 7-year, $100 million contract to avoid arbitration. You had to figure he would make a lot more now. And it was already obvious the Cardinals thought he was their future, and they made it more clear by trading Tino Martinez to the Devil Rays after 2003, allowing Pujols to play first base full-time. His defensive ability an underrated aspect, especially in his prime, and Pujols to be a massive part of the best Cardinal team he would ever play for. He started the All-Star game again, along with teammates Scott Rowland and Edgar Renteria, and Pujols would have 2 teammates in Scott Rowland and Jim Edmonds finish in the top 5 of MVP voting, all finishing behind Adrian Beltre and again Barry Bonds, as Pujols again led the league in runs and total bases, hitting 46 home runs, driving in 123, with a .331 average and a 1.072 OPS, as he joined Ted Williams and Joe DiMaggio as the only players with 500 RBIs for the first 4 seasons, as the Cardinals won 105 games, the second most in franchise history, to return to the playoffs. Pujols hadn't matched his regular season performance yet in the playoffs, but he did here. In Game 4 of the NLDS, Pujols had a huge 3-run home run and drove in 4 as the Cardinals beat the Dodgers. Then he began terrorizing the Astros, as in the NLCS, he would go 14 for 28 with 4 home runs and 9 RBIs in 7 games, aided by Jim Edmonds' walk-off home run in Game 6, as Pujols would be named NLCS MVP. but they ran into the Red Sox in the World Series as they would lose in 4 games, Pujols being 1 of 3 on the team to even hit over 250. Pujols in 2005 was just a tad worse than the previous 2 seasons as he started the All-Star game again, as Pujols would go on to lead the league in runs, and for the first time, he led the league in WAR, hitting .330 with 41 home runs and 117 RBIs with a 1.039 OPS. There had really been one thing preventing Pujols from getting an MVP, and that thing was Barry Bonds. But that year, Bonds injured his knee and only played 14 games, opening the door for Pujols. And though he was just a little worse than the previous 2 seasons, he was the best that year, taking home the award over Andrew Jones, as Chris Carpenter would go on to win the Cy Young, and Pujols would continue his postseason hot streak, facing the worst division winners of all time in the 82-win Padres, and they would beat them in 3 games, as Pujols hit .556 with 2 doubles over the 3 games. And again, they were facing their division rivals in the Astros, and after going down 3-1, the Astros appeared poised to be going to their first World Series. But then in the 9th, with 2 on and 2 outs, on the second pitch from Brad Lidge, Albert Pujols would launch a ball to the tracks, defining a crowd-silencing home run that Andy Pettitte called the farthest ball he's ever seen hit, arguably the biggest highlight of the many highlights of his career, and about as clutch as you can get. That home run becoming so famous that people forget the Astros regrouped and got their revenge at Game 6 to win their first pennant in the last game of Busch Stadium 2. And they went into Busch Stadium 3 in 2006, and Pujols hit the first home run in the stadium, and would go on to have what can be seen as his best season. At the end of April, he was hitting .346 with an MLB record of 14 home runs, including over the course of 2 games, hitting 4 home runs in 4 plate appearances, also recording his 1,000th hit in a month. And in an up-and-down year for the Cardinals, the worst part came when Pujols was placed on the DL for the first time in his career on June 4th, with a strained oblique. He would have missed 19 games and came back to start the All-Star game once again. And in an inconsistent season for the Cardinals, the one consistent was Albert Pujols. He led the league in WAR at 8.5 while hitting a career-high 49 home runs and a career-high of 137 RBIs, while hitting .331 and leading in slug, OPS, and OPS+. And the reason that's so impressive is he did this while missing 19 games, as he also won a Gold Glove 1 year after leading first baseman in errors. And though he won his first Gold Glove, he would lose MVP to the one who beat him in home runs and RBIs, and Ryan Howard. I personally think Pujols should have won, considering his value, as the Phillies did not make the playoffs, while the Cardinals wouldn't get close to the playoffs without Pujols. Pujols later saying in an interview in the Dominican Republic, "Someone who doesn't take his team to the playoffs doesn't deserve to win the MVP." He later apologized for saying this and said he was misinterpreted. I made an entire video about the 2006 Cardinals, as they would go on to be the worst World Series champions by record, and the reason for that, as mentioned, is their inconsistency. They lost 9 of their last 12 to barely win the division, but their losing streaks usually ended in a hot streak. They again faced the Padres in the NLCS, and the results were the same. The Padres did pick up a win, but they would again lose to the Cardinals, as Pujols hit .333 with a home run. And up next, they were facing the best team in the league in the Mets. And it looked that way as Tom Glavine shut them out in Game 1, prompting Pujols to say on Glavine after, "I say he wasn't good at all. We just didn't get some opportunities, and that's it." He did the same thing that he always does, throw a changeup, fastball, and that was it. He received some criticism for the comments, but with the series tied 2-2, he backed up his words by hitting a solo home run off Glavine, as they would win that game and take the series lead. The Mets would win Game 6, setting up for that great Game 7, where after Yadier Molina 2-run home run in the 9th, closer Adam Wainwright got Carlos Beltran looking for the Cardinals' second pennant in 3 years. And in the World Series, they were facing the Detroit Tigers, and Pujols did almost all his damage in Game 1, with a 2-run home run in the 3rd off rookie Justin Verlander, as it took Game 1, but they would lose Game 2. Both sloppy play by the Tigers, the Cardinals would win the next 3 home games, even with Pujols hitting just .200 in the series, as Pujols now had a World Series to add to his resume. He had pretty much won everything you could in a career to that point, and was already a borderline Hall of Famer. But obviously, there was more to come. 2007, however, was a championship hangover season for the Cardinals, as they finished under .500, and it was a little bit for Pujols. And just like 2002, it's saying a lot. He led in WAR for the 3rd straight year at 8.7, but he also led in double plays grounded into for the first time, a stat that he's the all-time leader in, hitting below .330 with an OPS below 1,000 for the first time since 2002, and this was his first season without scoring 100 runs, being at 99, with just getting over the hump to hit 30 home runs and driving 100. Like 2002, he was a tad worse, as he finished outside of the top 5 of MVP voting for the first time, but he went back to machine form the next year. He began 2008 by reaching base in 42 consecutive games, the longest streak to open a season since 1999. He would go on the DL for the second time in June with a strained calf muscle, almost the same time as in 2006, as he came back to again start the All-Star game, hitting his 300th home run just before. And he would go on to record a WAR over 9 for the first time, while recording a career high in slug and OPS along with OPS+. with the second highest average of his career at .357, which actually wasn't enough to win the batting title behind Chipper Jones, as he would go on to win the MVP for the second time. His past comment not aging well in this sense, as the Cardinals did not make the playoffs, while Ryan Howard, who finished second, won the World Series with the Phillies, but Pujols was too good to deny anyway. Pujols had been dealing with right elbow discomfort for years and actually considered having Tommy John surgery like many great pitchers like him have done, but he would undergo nerve transposition surgery on his elbow to ease his discomfort, and that led him into what is often viewed as his best season. He recorded his 1,000th career RBI on April 25th with a grand slam, that being a sign of things to come, as he would hit his 10th grand slam of his career in July to pass Sam Musial for the most by a Cardinal, that grand slam being his 350th home run, the third fastest of the mark behind Alex Rodriguez and Ken Griffey Jr. And with the All-Star game in St. Louis that year, he received the most votes in National League history, hitting his 5th and final grand slam of the season in August, which tied the NL record, and he would go on to lead in on-base, slug, OPS, OPS+, and total bases again, along with intentional walks, that Barry Bonds once had a monopoly over. And for the first time, he led the league in home runs at 47, while also leading in WAR for the 5th straight year, his 9.7 WAR career high, and the most by a player not named Barry Bonds since 2001. His WAR aided by his defense, leading first baseman in double plays turned, total zone runs, putouts, and setting a record with 185 assists at first. And he won his 3rd MVP, this time unanimously, as the Cardinals made it back to the playoffs, but this time they were swept by the Dodgers. And that ended the decade, Pujols being 1 run away from scoring 100 runs, hitting over 300 with 30 home runs and 100 RBIs in all 9 seasons. Pujols having the highest offensive WAR of the decade, along with the highest average and the second highest slug, RBIs, and home runs, behind Barry Bonds for the most MVPs in the decade, and without him in the picture, he very well could have won 5, but he had to settle with just 3. As for the entire decade, he was clearly the best offensive player, and before the next decade began, he got another surgery on his right elbow, again avoiding Tommy John surgery, and it was more the same to start the 2010s. It started with him being recognized for another underrated part of his game, as he won the Pepsi Clutch Performer of the Month in April, after hitting .348 with runners in scoring position, and in situations where his team was winning by 1, tied, or had the potential tying run on base after the 7th inning, he hit .583. He started the All-Star game again, and again, he led the league in WAR, his lowest since 2002, while also leading in runs, home runs, OPS+, and RBIs for the first time. But he ended up finishing 2nd behind Joey Votto in MVP voting, the two having similar seasons, but going back to team performance, the Reds won the division over the Cardinals. And really, this was the end of his run of complete dominance. The Cardinals exercised a $16 million option on his contract for 2011, but could not reach a long-term agreement. And in a year, he spent time in the DL a few weeks after hitting walk-off home runs on back-to-back days. Statistically, he had his worst season for the Cardinals. As mentioned multiple times, this is saying a lot, as some of his streaks came to an end, finishing with a .299 average and 99 RBIs, that ending a streak of 10 consecutive seasons with a .300 average, 30 home runs, and 100 RBIs, missing 2 of those by 1. Only Jimmy Fox and Alex Rodriguez having a 10-year stretch of hitting at least 30 home runs and driving in 100, but neither hit over 300 in each of those seasons, with Pujols also doing this to start his career. Pujols just missing out on reaching those numbers at the end of 2011, but he will say he cared more about the fact that he helped his team overcome a 10.5 game deficit at the end of August. This run was a little similar to 2006 in that the Cardinals got hot at the right time, while not being expected to. They faced 102-win Phillies in the NLCS, and after Pujols hit .350 in the series, the Cardinals won a 1-0 game in Game 5 to head to the NLCS against the Brewers, where Pujols put up numbers close to 2004, hitting .478 with a 1.469 OPS with 2 home runs, as the Cardinals won in 6 games for Pujols' 3rd trip to the World Series. This would often result in another NLCS MVP, but David Freese was in the midst of his demon run, facing the Rangers in the World Series. Almost his entire offensive output came in Game 3, one of the greatest single-game performances in World Series history, grounding out in his first at-bat, then recording singles in his next 2. Then in his next 2 at-bats, both of those were home runs, coming up in the 9th with a chance for history. And he got it, hitting the 6th pitch of the at-bat over the fence for his 3rd home run, joining Babe Ruth and Reggie Jackson as the only players to do so, as Pujols tied single-game World Series records for hits and RBIs, and set a record with 14 total bases. And he actually only got 1 other hit in the whole series, but it came at the right time. The Cardinals' 9th inning comeback in Game 6, topped by David Freese's 2-run triple, started with Pujols hitting a double, kind of forgotten in the grand scheme, as the Cardinals won that game in 11 innings. Then they won Game 7 the next night for Pujols' 2nd and final World Series ring. Becoming a free agent for the first time, he signed with the Angels at 10 years, $254 million, and you can really divide his career in 2, as there was a big decline after his signing, Granted, he was at great heights, but after recording a WAR over 5 in his first 11 seasons, he didn't have one season over 5 for the rest of his career, still having a few productive seasons, like his first season, which ended up being his best season by WAR, hitting his 500th home run in 2014, then making his only All-Star team with the Angels in 2015, recording home run number 600 in 2017, and hit number 3,000 in 2018, with his time with the Angels coming to an end in 2021, as he was DFA'd by the team, a time where Pujols dealt with injuries to his foot, along with the natural factor of age, amidst criticism towards the Angels for giving him a long-term expensive contract and resulting in just one playoff appearance. His last season at the age of 42, being more productive in terms of WAR, and all but 3 of his 10.5 seasons with the Angels, with all those seasons but 2020 seeing him play more games than he did in 2022, as that last season would see him become the 4th member of the 700 home run club while playing on his original team. In a 22-year career, the first 11 seasons seeing him hit 65% of his 703 home runs, 61% of his 3,384 hits, 60% of his 2,218 RBIs, and 85% of his 101.5 WAR. After the back half of careers usually being less productive, before the numbers Pujols ended with, it's a showcase of what he did in those first 11 years. In terms of hitting 30 home runs, driving in 100, and hitting over 300, also known as triple milestone seasons, only Babe Ruth has done it more than 10 times, while Manny Ramirez and Lou Gehrig also hit the 10 mark. The difference being that only Pujols did it consecutively, along with being the only one who started his career doing so, being the only player to hit 400 home runs in his first 10 seasons, aided by the fact that he got to start right away, while also having to keep his spot, leading to a first 10 years up there with the likes of Ted Williams, Mickey Mantle, Mike Trout, and Willie Mays. Obviously Babe Ruth is up there, though he was mainly a pitcher during the start of his career. And for his first 11 seasons, all spent with the Cardinals, his 445 home runs are well ahead of Eddie Matthews' 399 home runs, who is in second. His 455 doubles in that span ties Todd Helton for the most in the first 11 seasons, while he also has the most total bases, runs, and extra base hits through 11 seasons, while also being top in slug and OPS. So the start of Albert Pujols' career is up there with anyone who's ever played the game, putting up what would be a career year for most players 11 times, winning 3 MVPs like 11 other players have done, easily could have been more, without the only player who has more than 3 being in the picture. A tale of 2 halves in his career, with a great ending, all while hitting 17 home runs with a 1.128 OPS over his last 2 months at the age of 72. And you can watch my video about his spring training in 2001 to see how he forced his way onto the roster, leading to those great 11 years.